Confidence. It's a skill issue. It's not reserved for the special among us. You can work towards it. You can get better. At some point, you need to get in the water and swim.
I think a lot of people's issues around confidence are actually, they will tell themselves that it's anybody but themselves that's the reason.
If you want confidence, come to boot camp, Nat.
I don't think you can fake it till you make it.
I'm sure it will work.
And now... Confidence. It's a skill issue.
Skillish.
Skill issue. I think most things in life are a skill issue.
Everything is a skill issue. There is no, I don't want to hear, I don't even like hearing people say circumstances. I don't.
Why?
I'm not naive to the fact that they play a role. And I'm also aware that if you run the mathematics and the averages, that yes, everything is circumstances. So I can appreciate that. Just find that the people who run to circumstances as their answer tend to be, yeah, it's loud enough. They tend to perpetuate their own misery. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to point to something, you're going to say, hey, this is why things don't work, and this is why I'm in this situation. It's like no different than someone who hasn't lost weight for years. It's like, oh, well, it's because I grew up in a fat household. It's like, okay, and you can also change that. You can be the person of change. I grew up in a poor family. Okay, that doesn't have to be your truth. You grew up in a household where parenting, or in a family dynamic where parenting was done not in the most emotionally healthy way. I'm not saying any of us are perfect, but you probably can pick up some lessons and things on how not to do things, at minimum. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of people is, at minimum, in any situation you're in, you can find all of the things not to do. Mm-mm. And once you can identify that, which is pretty easy if you don't agree with how you experience something in life, then the question becomes, how can it become the thing you want it to be? But a lot of people don't even want to think that way.
Do you think, what's your take on preparation meets opportunity? Do you think that there is luck that comes into play in life?
I think you're more likely to be, I don't want to say more likely, when you're prepared, over time, it seems as if you run into more luck. I'll put it that way. I don't think that in any way it's preparation's the only piece. I find that the habit or the repetition of preparation is often the thing that gets you further, closer, whatever you're looking for, whatever that looks like. That's true in everything.
Do you believe in divine intervention?
Of course. I think life will, by nature, prevent you from having the things that you're looking for. Or counter, life will also give you everything you want before you're ready for it to get you to learn the other lessons that you just so grotesquely didn't want to pay attention to and wanted to miss. I think both things happen to some degree. I find in many cases, if I look at like the people who are most financially successful, at some point early in their life, most, not all, but most, they had to learn the lesson that money isn't everything. And equally, on the other side, there is the people who it takes a little bit longer to get to money, but they had to learn who they needed to become in that process. And I find those people tend to live a more fulfilled life over the course of time. Not that money is bad. Money is an amplifier. But yeah, why? Why do you ask about the divine intervention?
I have lots of thoughts about it. Like, the entire conversation is around confidence. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes when we go through life, we find ourselves in situations and opportunities that perhaps we're not ready for. And what do you do with them? Is that luck? Is it divine intervention? Is it a door opening up for you? Are you brave enough to walk through it and then willing to develop yourself, like being in that new space to stay in that room? Like, you look at some people's lives and it doesn't make sense how this opportunity showed up for this person
Yeah.
in this way at this time. You're absolutely in over your head
Yeah.
and not remotely qualified for
Yes.
the room or situation or experience that you just walked into.
100%.
So is that luck? Is that divine intervention? Is
It's
that
both. I don't think anything happens on accident. I think everything's for a reason. I equally find for most people, there is, if I look at people that I find to be the most lucky from the outsider's perspective, when I've met them, my perspective has been you feel like you belong. That's one. And then the other thing that comes to my mind, at least from the people that I look to and I'm like, that's cool. Like I admire and appreciate who you are. They almost like don't even talk about confidence. They talk about having like a deep trust and understanding that everything's a process and a journey of evolution rather than confidence. And it's not that confidence is a bad thing inherently. They just tend to, when they speak about their journey, here's the thing with confidence. You develop it. We're going to talk about how you develop it, but then part of what you have to realize over time is anything you get confident in, because that's how usually what happens. Like I got confident in lifting, I got confident in business, I got confident in marketing. There will always be something that comes up that reveals, hey, you don't know enough or you don't know what's required for the next level. And a lot of people will then ask, well, if the perception, if you get to the next level, you're now at a higher, like let's talk through a video game, you're at a higher level. That must make it harder because wherever they are, they're like, well, if that person's at that amount of income or that skill set, problem might be greater. I don't think it's that your problem is greater. Your perception of that problem is smaller, and your gap between where you are from a skill standpoint to where that problem is different than the person way down the road earlier and how they look at it. So I don't think it no longer becomes a confidence issue. It becomes a matter of, do you trust the approach that you are taking and putting into practice that will facilitate the outcome? And then equally, do you trust that you have the tools that if you don't have the answers, you can find a way? And I think that's part of what happens is as you develop, what I've noticed is as you develop what people perceive to be confidence, it's more a matter of trust of I am developing and becoming and creating the person, the skill set, etc. And when the roadblock comes, I have the tools. I'm better equipped to shorten the time cycle to solve the problem or figure out the next thing. I think that's what ultimately happens. What I find to be most people's perception of, hey, this person has a lot of confidence, I find it to be trust. And I think you see this a lot in athletics. I think that's where it's very stark to me. It's like if I've put a lot of reps in, I have a trust that I understand the process to repeat to create the outcome. Nowhere did I use the word confidence to describe the process. You might describe the feeling or the adjective of what's happening as confidence, but it requires trust. So that's often what I see, and that's often what I think about when I think this person's confidence. Like they must have a trust of something and have a process for it to cement it, facilitate it, whatever it is for themselves.
I find it interesting. I often don't look at people through the lens of confidence. That's not really a filter. If I walked into a room full of people, I probably wouldn't look at somebody and be like, oh, that person's super confident in themselves. That wouldn't be maybe how I would categorize somebody. Convicted in like where they're going and what they're doing and like what they value, but not really through, I think this person is super confident. I get asked a lot on social media, how do I develop confidence? How did you become so confident? How can I create that for myself? What are the steps? And like what we said at the beginning, I think confidence is a skill issue. And the coolest thing about everything being a skill issue is that you can develop the skill.
100%.
So it's not reserved for the special among us.
Yep.
You can work towards it. You can get better. And I think, you know, if we like stay on the topic of confidence, I think it's one of those things that you just work at it every single day in whatever capacity it is that you're developing it. And then all of a sudden you look up and you kind of turn behind you and you realize that all of a sudden a lot of things that used to be challenging or difficult, or maybe you were a bit like timid or bashful of, all of a sudden you're like, wow, I haven't felt that way in a really long time.
Yep.
And I don't think it's a slow burn. Like,
Very.
you don't wake up in like 2 weeks from now and be like, oh yeah, like I feel night and day different. It's looking back over the course of like 12 months, 24
Yes.
months, longer. And you're like, whoa, I show up really different these days
100%.
in these situations compared to when I first did.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the very first time I ever went live on social media, I was so nervous and so just terrified of it not being perfect. I was like, I don't want the dog to bark in the background. What if somebody opens up the door? I was so nervous about it that I remember just feeling like sweat and like snot was going to come out of my nose. I was so overwhelmed. And it's interesting. And I remember like having that experience, and I've had people ask me like, oh, you're so well spoken and you show up so confidently on camera. It's like, oh man, like you missed all the reps and all the videos where I was sitting there trying to like pad the house down to not have anything negatively influence it. And I think for somebody listening to this, if you struggle with confidence, you just have to do it messy.
Yes.
White knuckle it. Like you just got to go through the repetitions where you don't like it. You probably feel humiliated in some ways, which is the story that you're telling yourself about
100%.
that you should be further than where you are. And just the discomfort of growth. But I think we look at confidence as if it is this fleeting thing that like eludes us. Other people have it. I don't. How do I like tangibly get it in my life? As if it's something to acquire instead of how you show up.
Yeah. I think that when you speak to the humiliation thing or like the discomfort piece, I think one thing that I'm aware of for myself, I have certain skills like math, for example, that come very naturally to me. I still vividly remember the first time my mother was like, you're going to do your math tables. You're going to do your math with no showing your work. You have to be able to rip the answers quickly in your head like this. Like, you have to be able to do this in your head quickly. Like, you have to do the math. And I was like, I can't, 4 times 12, move the 4, carry the 2, comes like, couldn't do any of that. Right. And it was like my brain didn't like that at all. It fucking sucked. And I was like, fuck, I can't do anything right. And I remember this from when I was young. And a lot of the ways that when you learn skills, a lot of the times what I think it got ingrained in me young is, and I also think sometimes this is where people perceive me to be lazy, personal experience. I look at things through the lens of, I understand the discomfort of sucking at something. So let me quickly find the pattern to get reasonably good enough right off the rip that there's tweaks to make along the way. But it's not that feeling or it's not that experience. Because I remember the first time and I was like, no, this fucking sucks. And one of the best things I learned is, and you don't learn this until you've experienced certain things in life. I think this is true with all aspects of your life. Yet when I look across my life, if you want to get better at a skill, part of it after, I'd say a period of time, I wouldn't say it's an immediate thing for everybody, is learning how to think through your approach. Because a lot of people are like, well, I keep doing the same thing. I get a shitty result. I'm not confident because, and it's like, you didn't take the extra 5 minutes, the extra 10 minutes, the extra 15 minutes, simplifying your approach. If you if you throw spaghetti against the wall and it doesn't stick, and you're getting upset that nothing's sticking on the wall, it's a good idea to consider how you're approaching it. So that becomes that becomes kind of your progression as you learn to do stuff. It starts super messy, and then based on the mess you created and how you go through mess, you then learn how to think through your approach to then reduce the time, quote unquote, to develop a skill.
I think a lot of lack of confidence shows up in fear of being judged by others. We don't ask for help with stuff.
Yep.
And we don't ask for feedback on various things because, well, what if I ask you this and then you think I'm stupid?
Mm-hmm.
Or you have some negative association with where I'm coming from. But that impedes our ability to get the help we need to learn something faster because we don't want to be judged.
Do you think you have to go through the experience of feeling like you have to be judged before you realize that the only person who's judging you is you?
Do you have to go through that?
Because that's something that a lot of people will say is like, I'm not confident because I'm worried about people judging me, right? Like that's literally things that I've heard people say, well, what if this person thinks this? What if this person thinks this? Did you have to go through that in order to be able to let go of or to develop confidence? Or did you have to, is that a separate thing that you have to reconcile? Because I think a lot of people's issues around confidence are actually, they will tell themselves that it's anybody but themselves that's the reason.
I don't know. I think that you're scared that somebody is going to say the thing about you that you believe to be true about yourself. So, like, first glance, I don't want you to think this way about me. What if you think I'm dumb? What about X, Y, and Z? Well, the only reason that would hurt is because you believe it's true about yourself. I've had people say things to me throughout my life, and when they said it to me, I was just like, it was like water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
Like, didn't give a shit about it because I didn't believe that to be true about myself. There's probably been other times in my life where somebody said something to me and it stung, but you were just saying out loud the thing that I said to myself. So I think where most people's level of awareness is, it's probably, I don't want to be judged by somebody else, but ultimately I don't want to hear you say out loud the thing I say to myself behind closed doors.
So that would be the second big thing, right? Where it's like, tell the truth. You want to develop confidence, you have to develop this skill set in itself of extreme levels of truth telling to you. Like it probably hurts or bothers you when it comes from someone else's voice because there's either some merit you put into what they say or there's some level of truth to what they're telling you.
Telling the truth is almost like rebellion. We live in a world where people sugarcoat everything. They don't tell it like it is. They round off the edges of their expression around different things. So to tell the truth to yourself and be okay with it and tell the truth to other people is like quite literally an act of rebellion compared to everybody around you.
What does telling the truth look like to you? When we're talking about facilitating a space to develop confidence, what does telling the truth look like? Because there are people who will tell you, oh, but I tell the truth. But I still don't know why I'm not confident, but I'm always truthful. What does that look like in practice?
I think there's like both and to it. Like there's duality. So I think one side, it's like see yourself for where you are. Like where are your deficits? Where this is difficult because you are lacking in this area. And that is okay. On the flip side of that, you also have demonstrated throughout your whole life to be courageous. So there's both. And I think sometimes we hyper fixate into, well, I'm not good enough. This isn't working fast enough. I'm not intelligent in this thing. And it's like, yeah, like that's probably true in so many ways. Also, if that is the only filter in which you live, you will not see the fact that you continuously show up, you work towards things and get better. You're doing this because you have like pure intentions and you want to contribute to those around you. So I think tell the truth is like see the totality for what it is. I think people get disabled because they only focus on where they're not good. And they take the wind out of their sails from like even getting off the starting line. And if you couple that with, I don't have the belief in myself that I can figure it out, or it's not worth it because I haven't stuck with something long enough to develop that trust in myself, then you just end up staying in like the same perpetual rut. Then you throw some environment in with like friends and coworkers and like where you're around and you just like keep yourself trapped. And no shit, you're not confident. How could you be? Not only are you fighting with like the environment around you that you've chosen, but you also believe that like this is what you are worth.
So what does someone do if they're in a world where they're trying to reconcile that for themselves, like being truthful to themselves, and the environment around them is not conducive to that. What is your approach? As like looking back at your own experience, because I'm sure you didn't necessarily have all of the most. Everybody's like full support of what you're doing along the way, and you're trying to figure out how to tell the truth and get better at the things you want to get better at. So how does someone walk through that process to get out of it or to change it?
I think my approach was a little extreme, and I don't know if it's for everybody, but if I answer it like for
No,
what
just be
I
honest.
did,
Yeah.
I was like, this is where I'm at in my life. This is what I need to do. This is like the deficits in my character and my follow through. And I literally removed everything that negatively influenced it.
Mm-hmm.
If it made me anxious, I removed it. If it made me doubt myself, I got rid of those relationships. I would not even listen to music that made me
Feel away.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I just cut everything out of it. I had no space for potentially being influenced in any direction that wasn't like absolute, I'm going to get this done and develop myself as a person. And I don't know if in some ways I ever came out of that. Like, I don't spend a lot of time in environments. If I have nothing in common with you and I don't want to be in that space, I just don't go. If I walked into a room and everybody was negative, I'd be there for 5 minutes, I'd shake some hands, and I'd be like, something came up, and I would walk right back out the door. Like, my tolerance for being in environments that doesn't facilitate what I want is like, I probably killed that shit when I was like 16, turning 17.
Do you think in any ways it limits you?
Yeah, I'm sure extremism in anything probably limits you.
Specific to this, like what are ways that approach may?
Cutting off from everything.
Yeah.
I think when you first go through it, it's extremely lonely. I think that most people don't know how to be by themselves. You don't know how to entertain yourself. You don't know how to be in your own company. And I think that it is like a steep drop off for people to go from being surrounded by lukewarm company is better than like nothing. So to cut off from that, like you have to be so clear on what you want and why you want it, that you are, and have a trust that if you let go of everything that holds you back, that at some point life is going to catch up. And I think that that is fucking terrifying. And I think that stops a lot of people from going all in on something. I went through extreme periods of loneliness at various points in my life. Whenever I had like a huge change and shift of where I was going to the next iteration of what I was doing. A huge shedding of people and things that were comfortable. At this point, I've done it enough times that I'm like, okay, cool. Like this is the next round and iteration of this thing for myself. I think that level of extreme approach can be isolating. I also believe though that if you want to lose 80 pounds in a short window of time, that you shouldn't eat any junk food. You should stop going out to eat and you should just like dial the fuck in for like 10 to 12 months and get it done. And fundamentally like shift the way that you show up in the world, reset the waterline, and then figure out balance from there. I don't think that that approach is for everybody.
Fair.
But like, I don't know, do you want to take 5 years to get this done or do you want to take 12 months?
When you put it that way, I think the math checks out.
So I think a lot of people struggle with confidence because they do not put themselves in a space and in an environment to get enough repetition to do something. If you struggle with having difficult conversations, then you should make a rule that you should have those conversations within a 24-hour window. Just get it done. The more repetition in a shorter period of time, you're probably going to develop that skill really quick.
Yep.
Pop up in like 6 to 8 months from now, and it's going to be significantly easier. You might not be amazing at doing it, but it's going to be way better than where you currently are. So I think like with anything, how do you develop a skill? Will you just do higher quality repetition of it?
Do you think, and this kind of came to my mind as you were talking, so you're like doing higher quality, obviously telling the truth. Do you think, we've talked about this before, there's always the moniker of like fake it till you make it. How does that play out?
I don't think it does. I think fake it till you make it becomes suffocated by imposter syndrome. And you take the wind out of your own sails. Why are you faking it? Just,
So somebody told me that that was like the way to make it.
but that's like people ask too. It's like, well, how do I develop confidence? How do I become more confident in
Mm-hmm.
myself? And then in the same breath, that same person will be like, well, how do I overcome imposter syndrome? You tell the truth, and that eliminates this. You feel like an imposter because you're probably fronting compared to where you are and you're not being totally honest. If I walk into a situation and I don't understand something and I'm like, I'm not the best at this, I've never done this before, but I do have a track record of like figuring it the fuck out when I want to do something, like I'm all in for this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you the truth of like who I am and where I'm at. You might look at me and be like, I'm not interested in doing that.
Yeah.
But I also think that approach, people are like, God, what a breath of fresh air that somebody just is willing to say it straight, but also be like, I'm willing to show up and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that fake it till you make it works. I think you just end up being crippled by imposter syndrome. What is your thoughts about it?
I don't think you can fake it till you make it. I think there are some people who are personal experience better at creating a facade. I think once you understand what's going on and how people behave, it's very easy to see through the facade.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we've talked about it not on the podcast, but we've had conversations before where it's like you can see people on social media all the time, and it's not hard to pick up on who's creating an image and who is truly who they are. Like, especially if you understand what to look for. Mm-hmm. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's very easy to see, right? Sometimes it's like you look at someone, I'm like, I get it, you're doing it for the marketing gimmick and all that kind of stuff, but it will catch up to you. It will. And I personally don't find that you can fake it till you make it. I've lived in LA, so I've seen what that looks like in like its purest form. It doesn't actually work, even though people think it does. Like, there are different rules to the game of how Hollywood and acting works that I don't think people understand. I wouldn't even claim to understand it fully, but from the limited bit that I saw from friends around me, I don't think I don't think it's as simple as fake it till you make it. That might be what it's perceived as, but I don't think that in any way that's how it really works. And just in my general experience, I've seen people fake it till they make it to a degree, and it's come crashing down. Mm. I've seen people, like I was saying at the beginning, I think sometimes you get everything you were asking for before you become the person to magnify the things you never dealt with. Mm. So I think you can, if you're going to fake it to make it in one aspect, that's cool, and that might be able to get you to a point, but I can promise you it all comes crashing down in some form or fashion. Mm. I've watched it firsthand more times than I could probably even care to count at this point.
Yeah. Like
people we've both, I think, seen. I think we've both seen some of the same people crash out. And like, it's cool until it's not cool. It's cool until you have to look in the mirror and then realize that you weren't who you said you were. Mm. I think there's something beautiful about being able to accept that you're not perfect.
Like I said earlier, I think telling the truth is like an act of rebellion for most people. Mm-hmm. Because if you're in a room full of people and you commit to, I'm going to tell the truth, I'm going to develop myself, I'm going to be real about where I'm at, you will be an outlier compared to most people. Mm-hmm. And that is uncomfortable because we are hardwired to want community and acceptance and to not feel rejected. And we are also not the best at being vulnerable.
I think what you just said, though, and another way to frame rebellion is it's practicing courage. Mm-hmm. It's willingly putting yourself in the arena and saying, it's not going to be perfect. This will likely be uncomfortable. It probably won't look too good most of the time, whatever that means. And that is going to be part of my process. There is no way to develop confidence without courage. I think those two things have to go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. There has to be some level of, like you said, vulnerability to be able to put yourself in an environment where you are not good at something and work through the discomfort of not being good at something.
Yeah. I made a video and it was like, you can't learn to swim sitting on the edge of the pool. Mm-hmm. At some point, you need to get in the water and swim.
Mm-hmm.
And people will come up with so many reasons why they shouldn't get in the water.
No, not at all.
It's too cold.
No.
Today's not a good day. Maybe I'll come back tomorrow. Yeah.
The wind.
It shows up in everything. I think a little, like a small way that somebody can start to build confidence. It's like do something where the stakes feel lower.
100%.
And just be consistent with that. Like if you don't like going to the gym when there are people there, go to the gym 4 times a week when it is somewhat busy. And like the stakes are lower. That is insignificant compared to the other things that you could take on in your life and the risk and responsibility. And you learn to become more and more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. It's that idea of creating what's called asymmetric risk, where everything is upside in your perspective or whatever you're going through. They talk a lot about it in business, where it's like, well, how can we hedge / gear this all towards succeeding? And with the right perspective and then the right tools, you get better. Mm-hmm. Right? I think that's a big thing. I like the perspective of, even if it starts small, start with something. Mm-hmm. I think that makes a big difference.
I went through a period in my early 20s that I found myself quite antisocial out in public. Didn't feel compelled to talk to people. At times would get nervous. And I think I was like 21. And I made a commitment that every single day I was going to compliment 3 strangers, and it was going to be on something that they chose. Mm-hmm. Not something that was given to them. Like, oh, you have beautiful eyes. I would look at something that they were wearing, whether it was jewelry, something that you would have had to pick out to be like some form of expression from you. Mm-hmm. And everywhere I went, I would talk to the cashier at the grocery store, at the gas station, like pump, whatever it was. And I committed to doing that for like 6 months. And every single day I gave 3 people a compliment. And I got so good at talking to people out in public because I just forced myself to do it. And then I gamified it because I'm neurotic about everything I do. And I'm like, oh, we only got 2 people today. And then I would find myself out and about looking for like the 3rd person. And I would only do if it was genuine.
Yep.
And there was like some rules there. It's like, I'm not going to just like blow smoke up everyone's ass, but it's like, I need 3 genuine compliments a day. And then I would just get into conversations with people. And it's funny because I did that at 21. It was one of those things 6 months later, looking back, it was so easy to build relationships and like connect with people. Mm-hmm. And I look at my life today, I make friends everywhere I go. When I'm out in public. I had mechanics singing "O Canada" to me a couple weeks ago at the shop. Or waiters.
From self-isolating to "O Canada."
Or like I go into certain restaurants that I like to go to and people are like, oh, hello, I haven't seen you. Oh my God. And they know my order. That doesn't exist without the willingness to like start small. So when I say it's like, do it where the stakes are low, it's like I've done those things at various points in my life to develop communication skills, the willingness to put myself out there. If I was terrified of rejection, I would stand at the bottom of an escalator and I would like ask somebody something that I know the majority of people would tell me no for. And I would just stand at the bottom of the escalator and be like, we're going to move this shit right out of this system. So fucking bring the people on down. Again, like my approach might be extreme, but it's like, would you rather take 5 years or would you rather take like 12 months to get this done? You want to bang it out in a weekend? You're scared of getting told no? Stand at the bottom of the escalator and get it done. That's my extreme approach. If you want confidence, come to boot camp, Nat.
Yeah, you want extremes? Go right to her.
We'll get you cleared up.
Clear that shit right through your system. 72 hours, literally.
But I would be so loving and gentle through all of it. Cause I'd be like, I get it. No, you're safe. Get back in there. You got 20 more no's than you. It'll be okay. But skill issue, right? It's like repetition.
Repetition, trust, courage. I think if people just took a little bit of time to develop those 3 things, you can overcome so many things in your life. If you realize everything's a skill issue, you find ways to develop trust, and you have the courage to go after it. I mean, you solve most every problem in your life pretty quickly.
I also think sometimes people want to develop confidence, like confidence in your ability to do something comes from probably pattern recognition. You've done
Yes.
it so many times, you've improved it, it's gotten better. You
Mm-hmm.
trust that you can deliver a result. You also trust that you can solve for it if you can't.
Yes.
There's a level of resourcefulness there. And at times when I've seen people, like affirmations won't save you. Another personal development book isn't going to be the thing that helps you feel confident in
Correct.
what you're doing. Tactical, I can create this.
Yes.
I have done it. There's repetition here. I have like truly developed the skill is I think on a lot of times what bridges that gap.
Yes.
So find the thing that you want to get better at and develop the skill.
Mm-hmm. 100%. I think at some point you then, and this is very helpful for skill development, I think, and also confidence as a whole, is once you've gotten good at a couple of things, find common patterns in how you think and approach things. Because you'd be surprised an approach or a thinking perspective can shorten your time curve to developing other skills. I think a lot of people get good at one or two things but never take the time to think. And I'm not here to cripple you with think before you act, because I think part of it is you have to learn. The other side of it is after a couple of things that you've gotten good at, if you find yourself taking the same amount of time to develop every skill, probably has more to do in your approach and your thinking than the way you're executing. And so that's something for if you're listening to think about is, okay, I've developed a couple things that I'm good at, but it seems like every new thing that I add on, it still takes a long time to develop the skill. Why is that? And look at the way you're approaching it. Look at the way you think through it. That has probably been the best gift I've gotten in my life, is learning how to think and approach things. There are things that I have condensed personally in considerably shorter than the average person. And I don't think it's because I'm any better or any of that, but the people around me that I've learned from have placed a huge emphasis on it's a good idea to use the thing that lives between your ears. It's there for a reason. And especially when you are developing the first skill or whatever that looks like, it's not a bad idea to use it either. Because I think part of what happens for people is the discomfort of not wanting to suck at something and the unwillingness to accept that the way they see the world or see the thing might be the problem, not that the thing is the problem, often does limit the skill development. So that's another thing, is like think a little bit.
Yeah. I'm curious your thoughts on this. Because like when I'm listening to you talk, for me, a lot of the things that I had to overcome in my life where maybe I lacked confidence was more so, best way to describe it was like control my body.
Mm-hmm.
Like in that environment. It was, you are fucking terrified right now and having like just such a visceral response to like whatever it is going on. And for me, when I talked about like the extreme approaches I would take, it almost was like forced into learning how to control my body in those environments and my like emotional reactions to things. I'm curious your thoughts about that. Like, is it the mind or is it sometimes your like nervous system's reaction to what is going on?
I think it's both. I think you'd have to go down a pretty interesting depth to understand how trauma and the brain work. I think that's one of them. I don't think so. I'll give you what I've learned. A lot of times it's like a fight or flight thing for people. And so if you feel your body viscerally a certain way, you will by default cope in the way that you understand how to survive. So like for a lot of people, that is, for many people, I don't want to say a lot, but for many people, that might be the extreme of how you handled it. Like work through it. So like find the answer as fast as possible to like eliminate that feeling, right? I think there's definitely good in that to a degree. We've talked about this, you and I, before, but I don't think in the journey of healing or internal work or therapy or whatever the goal is to be healed. It's a lifelong journey of healing, and it's learning how to channel dark into light. And I think that's another thing too, is like if the only outcome in all of this is extremes, but it doesn't actually deal with the emotional state, it will catch up to you. And that's something for everybody to be aware of. I think you've had that experience too, where it's like the extremes maybe helped temporarily resolve an emotional state, it did not eliminate the long-term issue. And so the extreme perpetuated and perpetuated and perpetuated. So I think that's part of it too. It's like learning how to take what you experience and turn it into a superpower, while also understanding how to have that come from a place of, I don't even want to say joy, but purpose, if you will. Because I don't think like dark energy or coming from a place of pain is inherently a bad thing. It does become an extremely terrible thing if it doesn't have any guidelines or awareness around why it's happening that way. We've talked about even stuff with you where it's like the things you're great at, a lot of those skills you develop through pain. If you don't learn how to create context around the pain, you end up becoming a resentful person, because then it's like, what am I doing this for? I think it's learning how to dance that line.
Yeah.
That takes practice.
I think there's moments, like I agree, that's like work through your stuff. I also think there's like moments in life where just shit hits the fan in the moment, and you have to be willing to be your own cheerleader through it and change your state to just like make it fucking happen. Because if you get out of the arena in that moment, you are not getting back into it. Or it's like a kid that falls off a horse. If I was a parent, and maybe this is extreme, and like maybe in 5 years I'll change my mind. If I had a kid and they fell off the horse and the horse didn't buck the kid off and they just fell off, I would get on the ground. I'd be like, you're okay. We would deal with it. And I'd stick their little ass right back on the fucking horse. And I probably wouldn't leave the arena without putting that kid back on the horse, because if you have this incident and there is no calming and nurture and then put you back on there, oftentimes we get hurt and then we don't want anything to do with the situation anymore. I think that happens so many times in our lives that if you want to develop confidence in those moments, like don't let yourself get out of the arena.
So I agree. I think the one caveat I would put to that is kids have something that most people lose as they go through life. Kids have curiosity. Kids also have a turnaround time on. I think you and I have talked about this before, but when we were kids, we would scrape our knee. It's like a 15-minute process from tears to I'm ready to play again. But they deal with the problem. They live with joy and freedom, and they're almost fearless. They just go back to whatever. The question, but here's the thing: kids like go through their emotional experiences very purely. The question I always ask people is like, are you truly willing to go through your experience purely? Because you can reclaim / have exactly what that kid has, a more mature version of that. But if you don't welcome the feeling, that's where the gold is. There's lessons to be learned.
Yeah.
And if the lesson is don't go into the arena, or, oh, I'm in pain, then yeah, I agree. You'll leave the arena. But if the lesson is, hey, there's something I can learn here and move forward with to evolve, grow, etc., then different story.
Yeah. I think we know when we're in those moments where don't let yourself off the hook here.
Yeah.
Do like 10 jumping jacks, move your fucking body, get back in there, and like don't let this be the point that you quit and you give up, because it would be so easy to let fear and discomfort and vulnerability be the thing that like takes you out of this room right now.
I also think that many people will scrape their knee and then not actually Band-Aid it or put ointment on it. They'll just drag themselves continuously with a bum knee. So you have to be able to discern that aspect as well. And that's its own journey in a sense. That can be a topic for a different day.
So confidence, skill issue. Any final departing words?
Skill issue. It's not that deep. Trust yourself and get in the arena. Read the Teddy Roosevelt quote. Watch Brene Brown for 15 minutes. Run through a wall.
You could teach them how to box breathe one day.
Yeah, we did. You guys missed a whole exercise before this episode started, so it'll be good. We'll have a box breathing exercise. There's nothing you can't breathe through. Please like, subscribe, follow, leave a review, tag us. This pays my bills.
So full of shit.